Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. The Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms is in court fighting for churches in many provinces. We have an update from the group's president, John Carpe. An outspoken Medicine Hat MLA says if we do not lift restrictions soon, there may be many more suicides in Alberta. And some sweeping changes in divorce law in Canada, which will have a major impact on children. We have the details.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The government of Alberta announced that it is slowly easing more restrictions today. Health Minister Tyler Shandro says the reopening includes libraries and low-intensity fitness activities.
First, we're allowing libraries to open, subject to a limit of 15% of fire code capacity, not including staff. And this considers the concerns that we've heard related to the important role that libraries play, in particular in some rural communities where they have limited access to high-speed internet. And the second, adults will be allowed to restart their fitness routines. Low-intensity individual and group fitness activities will now be allowed indoors, like Pilates, Tai Chi, and indoor climbing. And I know that many Albertans are eager to get back to other activities like running on the treadmill. High-intensity activities like that are still only allowed on a one-on-one basis with a trainer or for a household and one trainer. Wearing masks will still be mandatory during low-intensity fitness activity and for coaches or trainers during high-intensity activity, and all participants will need to stay 3 meters apart.
Shandro adds the drop in fitness is still not allowed. Now, as for COVID-19 numbers, the provinces over the past 24 hours, there were 291 new cases of COVID-19 today, along with 2 more deaths. The Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms was in court today challenging BC's prohibition on in-person worship services, which have been in place since November 19th of last year. The Justice Centre filed a constitutional challenge on behalf of 3 churches and 4 people, and in response, the BC government filed an injunction application targeting the 3 churches. Last month, the court denied the government's request for an injunction. Joining me now to talk about this case is the president of the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, John Carpe. John, what are you hoping to really accomplish with this challenge?
We want to see these churches reopen as soon as possible, and we want to end the arbitrary, unfair discrimination against churches when, in fact, the BC government is allowing restaurants and big box stores to remain open. So there's no science behind church closures, and we want to see them reopen as soon as possible.
You say churches have gone through extraordinary lengths to comply with extensive health guidelines. Can you explain?
Our client churches in BC practice social distancing. They encourage mask wearing. They have hand sanitizers. They have extra cleaning and disinfecting protocols. And they're also adhering to capacity limits, and they're insisting on social distancing. And in spite of being willing to do all of that, they've been shut down by force of law since November of 2020. So we're going on 4 or 5 months now of churches and other houses of worship being closed in British Columbia.
Now, to justify its orders, the BC government cited 180 alleged COVID-19 cases associated with religious gatherings in the province. To date, there have been close to 80,000 cases in British Columbia. You say the numbers don't really justify the restrictions?
We have to remember that these PCR tests are not scientific and they're not meaningful. But even just taking the numbers at face value, you've got 0.25% of the PCR positive tests that are being linked to houses of worship. So that's 99.75% of cases in British Columbia have no connection to any church. And on top of that, the churches, our clients, are willing to, do all of the social distancing and hand sanitizing and everything else. So there's just no intelligent evidentiary basis for the government's case. And of course, we're hoping that the judge will see it that way as well.
We will be following this case very closely. That was John Carpe, president of the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, joining me from Calgary. The Justice Centre will also be in an Alberta court on Wednesday to appeal the bail conditions for Pastor James Coates. Pastor Coates of Grace Life Church near Edmonton remains in jail awaiting his trial in May after refusing to agree to his bail conditions, which includes not hosting full church services. The Justice Centre said that 8 weeks is too long for Coates to remain in jail. The church has been holding services that officials say break public health regulations on attendance, masking, and distancing. Now, there are churches who are obviously in support of what Coates and other churches are doing, breaking restrictions, but there are others who simply do not. Some say these actions go against what Christians should be doing. Reverend Cameron Fraser is a retired pastor from the Christian Reformed Church in Lethbridge, and he says there are many churches who are following the public health regulations set out by the province. He feels that churches should obey the laws of the land and that doing otherwise is sending the wrong message about Christianity.
I think as Christians, we need to be going the extra mile in obeying the government, even when we don't agree, praying for them. And that's the witness we need to have to the world. Not that we're just concerned about our own rights and fueling their animosity towards us. I think it's doing incalculable damage to the cause of Christ. Millions of Christians in the world who suffer real persecution, real oppression. And I'm sure they'd be more than happy to live under a government that asks them, for the good of society in general, to wear masks, to accept some restrictions on their. It's not like we can't worship at all.
There's an Alberta UCP MLA who says the provincial government lockdown measures need to end right now. Drew Barnes, who's an MLA for Cypress Medicine Hat, says if the restrictions do not end soon, the government may see a lot more lawsuits as a result.
I believe there's a reckoning coming for this. You know, it's so sad. We're, community of 63,000 and we have to be over 20 suicides, never mind the addictions and the overdoses and the strife that you just can't measure. And it's one of the reasons I joined the anti-lockdown caucus. Let's measure what the government's doing. Let's look at all the effects. Let's talk about it. If there's going to be a COVID-20, if we're going to have to go into lockdown again, let's continually strive to do the best we can for all Albertans.
MLA Barnes will also share his thoughts on equalization and how a referendum on the topic is needed ASAP. That Q&A with Jeanette Roche is coming up after Business News. Some sweeping changes in Canadian divorce law took effect today, which will have a major impact on children. Experts say the new laws will promote children's best interests, reduce family violence, and make the justice system more accessible. Now, some of the changes include specific best interest factors to protect a child's safety and well-being, including the child's views and cultural heritage, consideration of family violence and what constitutes family violence, new regulations on moving with a child and parenting time, parenting plans, and contact by a non-custodial spouse. Andrea Doyle, Senior Advisory Counsel on Family Law with Legal Aid Alberta, says the new laws really put the focus on the child as the center of everything. She says the needs of the child outweigh those of the parents and grandparents. A doctor from Northern Alberta has been nominated as the first Indigenous president-elect of the Canadian Medical Association. Dr. Alika Lafontaine of Grand Prairie is set to be confirmed as the CMA's president-elect at the annual general meeting in August. His presidency would then begin in August of 2022. The association's presidency is rotated among provinces, and Alberta's doctors chose Lafontaine, who is Cree and Métis. The CMA says Lafontaine co-led the Indigenous Health Alliance from 2013 to 2017. This is the start of Indigenous Awareness Week. The University of Lethbridge is celebrating the history of Indigenous people in our city and across southwestern Alberta with a whole host of online content. Organizers say this week is important in highlighting the culture and history of Indigenous people in our region.
For this year's Indigenous Awareness Week, we are virtual, offering this to the community. The university campus has come together with faculties and departments taking the opportunity to honor our students, our Indigenous students, but welcome all of our non-Indigenous students to take part in a variety of activities. There's so much growth that has happened in terms of looking at role models throughout the Indigenous community local here, and we're very happy to honor and welcome all of our visiting Indigenous students, non-Indigenous students, and ensure that we're just sharing and respecting each other's values, culture, and background.
The festivities will end on Friday afternoon at 4 p.m. with a film screening to wrap things up. Have you ever wanted to sell your items in bulk during the pandemic but had trouble finding a website to sell them on? Well, as Micah Quinn explains, a local man has created a website to help those who are needing to sell items quickly on sites like Kijiji and Facebook Marketplace.
Alexander Pizzuto says that listing bulk items online can take hours, and there aren't a lot of websites where you can list them all in a fast and efficient process.
And I kept talking with more and more people and finding out this was the case. So we decided to build a tool that people could use to list their items in minutes instead of hours. So this significantly streamlines the process in listing your items to sell, and then you kind of create your own mini store, and then you're able to share that on Facebook or Kijiji with just a link, and then the description goes into that. So
users can add a multitude of items to the listing, and the company wanted to improve the exchange process for their customers.
And so we further simplified and streamlined that process, and then made everything contactless. So made all the payments online, and just try to really re-envision the whole buy and sell marketplace for 2021. So one of the things that's really different here is, unlike Kijiji or Facebook, in those cases you list every single item individually, and it just becomes a really long process. So we said, why not never have to leave the page? Like, why can't you upload 100 items at once without ever leaving the page?
Pizzuto says that Resale is doing live testing now, and they're hoping to make the site available to the public later in the month. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Lethbridge firefighters were called out to a residential fire on Sunday around 3:45 p.m. 24 firefighters were called out to a home in the area of 16th Street and 2nd Avenue North. When they arrived, they found a single-family residence on fire. It was reported to have started on the exterior and quickly spread to the outside of another home. Damage to both properties estimated at around $185,000. The cause of the blaze is under investigation. The Lethbridge Hurricanes have opened up their season with 2 straight losses. Saturday's 7-2 loss at home completed a home-and-home sweep in the hands of the Edmonton Oil Kings. A few players made their WHL debuts, and despite the losses, head coach Brent Kissio was impressed with the play of some of his young players.
Conditioning will be our focus for the next little bit, and to add structure and things like that we had in place last weekend. You got to be able to think the game, and that's part conditioning. When you get tired, things go by the wayside, and we got tired last weekend. So it happens with the younger group. It's a learning curve for us, but we got to learn and adapt quick. And the positive was our young guys. I thought our young guys did a great job. They came in, they played well. We saw a lot of high skill in our young guys, and they're only going to get better and better. So we're excited about them.
Personally, on that level, I got like everyone else in this room, we got to be better. And obviously it wasn't the weekend we looked for, but it will be a hard week of practice, and we'll correct things like Kiss said, and we'll just be back here.
One Lethbridge Hurricane, 17-year-old Zach Stringer, is hoping to put his on-ice contributions to a very good cause. For every goal he scores this season, he'll be donating $5 to the Canadian Cancer Society. Many fans took to social media saying they too will donate on his behalf. Stringer says the cause hits very close to home for him.
Growing up, I watched my dad fight for his life with battle cancer, and sadly lost that fight. And I've always wanted to do something towards cancer research, and I thought this year would be the best year to do it. It's a big meaning, obviously, for me and other people. I know lots of people are behind it.
From the Lethbridge Hurricanes to the Medicine Hat Tigers, Bob Ridley, play-by-play voice for 50 years, called his 4,000th Tigers game over the weekend. The WHL announced the Bob Ridley Award for Media Excellence. The award will be presented annually to a media member. Ridley says, looking back, the Southern Alberta community has meant so much to him, including Lethbridge.
And we've got a great rivalry, the Tigers and also Lethbridge over the many, many years. I've got so many good friends over there in Lethbridge that I've made over the years. And as far as I'm concerned, we're one big community here in Southern Alberta. So, I just feel so good about the fact that we get it done each and every time out between the Tigers and the Lethbridge Hurricanes. And I'm looking forward to our meetings. Up until I think our next go-around will be in about 2 weeks' time. So I'm looking forward to that.
I had the pleasure of working with Bob at Chat TV in Medicine Hat around 16 years ago or so. He's a kind and compassionate man who loves his community in junior hockey. He even drove the team bus for a number of years. If ever there was an award to be named in someone's honor, Bob Ridley would be my choice as well. Congratulations, Bob. A battle between lawsuits related to the Humboldt Broncos bus crash will be heard in a Regina courtroom this week. 11 suits were filed after the crash in April of 2018. 16 people died and 13 were injured when a semi-truck blew through a stop sign into the path of a junior hockey's team bus near Tisdale, Saskatchewan. Lawyers for the proposed class action lawsuit plan to ask a judge this week to delay another lawsuit filed by 5 families. Even in the midst of a pandemic, Saskatchewan residents rallied to raise money for the annual telethon charity Telemiracle. The 45th annual event raised more than $5.6 million over the weekend. The funds will go towards the Kinsman Foundation to help families who need special medical equipment and financial assistance for medical travel. A proper diet is vital to good health. Now, that's according to family doctor Don Colbert. He's also author of the book, Dr. Colbert's Healthy Gut Zone. Dr. Colbert says gut health is so important that it even impacts our brain.
2/3 of our immune system is located in our gut. To have good mental health, we need to have a healthy gut. We're finding now that if the gut is compromised, people are more prone to depression and anxiety, as well as even dementia is linked to the gut.
Dr. Colbert will have more on the importance of a healthy gut coming up in the second half of our program. The United States House of Representatives approved a $1.9 trillion pandemic relief bill. U.S. President Joe Biden says it is the first step in providing another dose of aid to a weary nation as the measure now moves to a tense Senate.
We're one step closer to vaccinating the nation. We are one step closer to putting $1,400 in the pockets of Americans. We're one step closer to extending unemployment benefits for millions of Americans who are shortly going to lose them. We're one step closer to helping millions of Americans feed their families and keep a roof over their head. We're one step closer to getting our kids safely back in school.
Syrian state media reported an alleged Israeli airstrike over the weekend near Damascus. Meanwhile, Israeli media reported that the alleged airstrikes were on Iranian targets in response to an attack on an Israeli-owned ship, which Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu blamed on Iran. When an Ethiopian woman's husband was killed for his faith in 2013, the Christian charity Open Doors stepped up to help support her family. But 7 years later, when COVID-19 restrictions began, it again left her unable to feed her children. As we hear in this next report, the charity stepped up once again to help her and thousands of other families in need across Africa.
In 2013, Abebu's husband, Ritter, was on his way home from church when he was shot dead because of his faith in Jesus. Abebu, a mother of 8 children, was left with no means to provide for her family. But Open Doors came alongside them, giving practical help as well as trauma care.
You supported my children with school fees and you helped me to find this house. The church usually helps us out with food and clothes so that we lack nothing. May God bless my brothers and sisters.
However, when COVID-19 struck last year, the economic restrictions made life terribly hard again. Abebu's children used to be given meals at school, but boarding schools were closed and they had to return home. With the markets and churches shut too, Abebu couldn't earn a living or receive her usual help.
Before the COVID-19 restrictions, we used to go to the market to buy big bags of grain. The next day, we would resell the grain in smaller portions. With the profit we made, we bought salt, coffee, grains, and we lived on that. But now we have used up all the money we had earned and we can't do anything but stay at home. These days, all the churches are closed. That means that our church does not have any income, so they can't help us with food. Please pray for me that the God who helped me yesterday will also help me today.
Thankfully, a baby was helped as part of the Open Doors relief effort to provide for 15,000 families in Africa affected by COVID-19.
So many people in dire need right now. While many areas of the country were hit by blasts of snow, here in southwestern Alberta, it was actually quite mild again. But will it last? Complete weather details are coming up. Those Chinook winds brought us some much warmer temperatures here in southwestern Alberta once again. Jeanette Rocher is back with a full look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, we could see sunshine and double-digit temperatures for most of the week.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be surprised if we break some records later on this week. Hal, I mean, look at these temperatures coming up. 15 on Thursday, 18 on Friday. Yeah, so we'll have to wait and see what happens. But until then, yeah, windy conditions. We're going to be getting a west wind this evening at 50 kilometers per hour, gusting to 70 at times. Overnight low tonight, 1 degree. Into tomorrow, Tuesday, 9 degrees, lots of sunshine and wind, 50 to 70 kilometer per hour winds as well. 12 degrees on Wednesday. Sunny week ahead of us. Look at all this sunshine on Tuesday through next Saturday. 15, as I was saying, on Thursday, 18 degrees for Friday, 16 on Saturday, and a nice round number of 10 degrees is our expected high for next Sunday. So these lovely temperatures are looking it's more like spring than the end of winter, which we are in. So I would say March has definitely come in like a lamb, because we are over this average high for this time of year, which is 3, average low -9. 15 was our high temperature back in 1994, and it was a chilly -30 back in 1989. 7:14 is when the sun rose this morning. Our sun set this evening at 6:13. Look at that, 11 hours of daylight. Not too bad. Let's take a look at what's happening across the rest of the country. Over on the west coast, 8 degrees, sitting steady there at 8 for both Victoria and Vancouver. Mix of sun and cloud. In Edmonton and Calgary tomorrow, lots of sunshine. 5 degrees is the high in Edmonton, 6 in Calgary. Not too much wind either, about 15 kilometers per hour. We can certainly handle that in Chinook territory. The rest of the prairies, though, fairly windy conditions up to 50, 60 kilometers per hour in all 3 of these cities. -1 Saskatoon, Regina tomorrow sitting at 2 degrees, and a lovely 5 degrees in Winnipeg with a mix of sun and cloud. Now over in central Canada, we've had some weird weather. White squall warnings in effect for both Ottawa and Montreal earlier today. That should clear up by tomorrow. Toronto also had blowing snow in the mix there, but the temperature is kind of evening out for this time of year, certainly. Over in Fredericton, 60% chance of flurries tomorrow, 70K winds, 60K winds, and 50 in Halifax and Charlottetown, with 30% chance of flurries tomorrow. -10, -9, and -8 in those cities. 1 degree is where St. John's will be sitting tomorrow. They could possibly see up to 10 centimeters of snow and up to 100 kilometer per hour wind gusts. So there you have it. That is your weather forecast.
A WestJet spokesperson says negotiations are ongoing with the union representing its pilots following last week's announcement of an undisclosed number of layoffs. Company officials say the layoff notices are out ahead of the expiration of a memorandum of agreement on March 31st. The airline announced that on February 5th that it would be laying off 120 cabin crew members as of March 2nd, blaming the measure on the lack of flights to Mexico and the Caribbean due to government restrictions. Air Canada says it has reached a deal to make Jazz Aviation the sole operator of its express flights. It says it expects to save around $400 million over the next 15-year term of the agreement with a subsidiary of Chorus Aviation. The change means Air Canada will transfer operation of express flights to Jazz from Sky Regional. The carrier says it is consolidating its regional flying with Jazz due to the pandemic and the need to reduce costs. BMO Capital Markets will host its 30th annual Global Metals and Mining Conference this week. The online event is on until March the 5th. Shares of metals and mining companies have rebounded sharply from the lows of last March at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Attorney General of Texas is suing electricity provider Griddy for passing along massive bills to its customers during last month's winter storm. The lawsuit comes days after the power grid manager in Texas effectively shut down Griddy by revoking its access to the state's electricity market. Griddy charges up to $10 a month to give people a way to pay wholesale prices for electricity. When a storm blanketed much of Texas with snow, causing major blackouts, however, wholesale prices spiked and Griddy customers were left with sky-high electricity bills, some in the thousands of dollars. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 239 points in the day to finish at 18,300. The Dow was up 603 points to 31,536. The S&P 500 was up 90 points to 3902, and the Nasdaq was up 396 points to 13,589. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $1.23 to $60.27 US per barrel. Natural gas was up a cent to $2.78 US. Gold was down 6 cents to $17.2498 US an ounce, and silver was up a cent to $26.58 US an ounce. Wheat is at $305 per metric ton, barley's at $308, canola's at $7.45, and corn is at $342 per metric ton. Live cattle were down $1.03 to $118.98. Feeder cattle were down $1.48 to $137.20, and lean hogs were up 58 cents to 87.73. The Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours at 79.07 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms will be in an Alberta court on Wednesday to appeal the bail conditions for Pastor James Coates. Pastor Coates of Grace Life Church near Edmonton remains in jail awaiting his trial in May after refusing to agree to his bail conditions, which includes not hosting full church services. The Justice Centre said that 8 weeks is far too long for Coates to remain in jail. The church has been holding services that officials say break public health regulations on attendance, masking, and distancing. The Alberta government's lockdowns need to end right away. That's according to Cypress Medicine Hat MLA Drew Barnes. He says the restrictions are causing a lot of mental health issues and even some suicides. Watch the interview with MLA Drew Barnes and Jeanette Rocher coming up momentarily.
Albertans want a fair deal from Ottawa and the rest of the nation as the province continues to pour huge dollar amounts into equalization payments. There's a separatist movement brewing here as a result. Today's guest is very outspoken on this issue, as well as the move to end COVID lockdown measures. Drew Barnes is the MLA for Cypress Medicine Hat in Southeast Alberta, and he is joining me now from his car via Zoom. Welcome to Bridge City News, Drew.
Jeanette, thanks for talking to me today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So before we get started about getting a fair deal for Alberta, we just had the provincial budget come down. Can you briefly share your thoughts on the pros and cons? Is going into deeper debt justified?
No, well, first of all, the deeper debt is part of our problem with Ottawa. The fact that $25 billion a year leaves Alberta, the fact that this year's deficit is $20.2 billion, next year's is estimated to be $18.2, the savings are right there. Previous governments, previous lack of attention by taxpayers has led to where Alberta is now $100 billion in debt. Interest next year will be $2.7 billion, Jeanette. My goodness, that's more than whole departments. That money could be better spent on Albertans that need health, education, or social services. One of the good news, though, in the provincial finance minister's budget is he is going to bring per capita spending down to the same level of other big provinces. And it's time for Alberta to start to not only get a better deal with Ottawa, but get our spending in order.
Right. Okay. Now, Drew, you're on Alberta's Fair Deal panel because you're saying Albertans want a fair deal, obviously. So you believe that Alberta should adopt a provincial constitution. How do you see this helping our situation?
Well, first of all, a written Alberta constitution would go a long way. It would help pull all the cultural components of Alberta together so we can work together, Jeanette. And secondly, it would tell our Canadian partners that we believe in resource movement, we believe in risk taking, we believe in charity, we believe in helping communities. And then secondly, it could define the size of government. We have seen time and time again how Ottawa especially reaches into our lives. They can't control our resources because we own them, so they make laws that impact the environment, the tanker ban, the no more pipelines laws. It would be a way to start to put those things in writing to protect Alberta and our future. And it would be the start of the Alberta autonomy that we need to build so we can get that Ottawa's $25 billion out of our economy off our back, and we can start to direct a strong and free Alberta.
This fall, we'll see Albertans voting in a provincial referendum on the equalization. Certainly here in southern Alberta, a lot of us believe that we're getting hosed, but what do you think this referendum will actually accomplish?
Well, I think first of all, a strong signal from Albertans that we've had enough of paying for, all the costs across Canada, way more than our proportionate share, then Ottawa denying us resource movement, Ottawa denying us a chance to have Senate reform, and even the same amount of support as they give to other parts of Canada. That will be the start of that signal, and that will go a long way to do some goods. But Jeanette, it may die there. So it's one of the reasons about 10 days ago, I came out and I said the same day as our provincial election, which would be about a year after the equalization referendum, so October 2023, we need a referendum on independence. We need to put Ottawa on notice that Albertans have had enough, that it's time for a fair deal. We're willing to take the risk of opening the Constitution, of standing up to Ottawa if they don't give us resource movement, democratic reform, and fairness. And this way, Albertans can be the judge as to whether Ottawa has given enough, as to whether Ottawa has given us equality.
Well, that's true, but do you believe that Albertans would actually be better off as a nation than as a province?
Well, I just believe that Alberta should be the freest, most prosperous place. We got the best people. We're risk takers, agriculture, forestry. We have the third biggest oil reserve in the world. Landlocked, we're landlocked by our physical nature. So landlocked is not a difference. We'd be less bottlenecked if we were independent than we are if Ottawa, controls us the way they do now. Jeanette, I just believe that Alberta should be the freest, most prosperous place. If that's within Canada, that's great. If that's not within Canada, that's great too.
So where would you peg support for independence at? What are you hearing from your constituents about that?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I would say about 30% now. 30% of people that have had enough with Ottawa, believe they will never change, are so tired of the Laurentian elite controlling us. But the Fair Deal panel showed it's up to 80%. 80% of Albertans want to take some level of risk, want to do some pushback to Ottawa, to open the Constitution, to get resource movement, to stop equalization, to have our own police force, have our own pension, have our own control over immigration. So that 30% that I think would vote in favor of Alberta independence today could grow as high as 80%, depending on what happens the next little while with Ottawa's treating us fairly or not.
So let's say Alberta votes down a separation. So do you think a referendum would strengthen our hand in negotiating a better deal with Ottawa?
Yeah, first of all, I'm wondering why, like 10 provinces, how it ever evolved to where one of the 10 is treated so unfairly compared to the rest. I mean, Saskatchewan is in a similar boat, I suppose. But why wouldn't our Canadian partners want a fairer deal anyway? It would be good for everyone. So I think the more we raise that awareness, there's many, many hardworking people in Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes that aren't as clear on the situation, aren't as clear on the policy details as we are. I think anytime you shed light on something, anytime Albertans let all Canadians know where we stand, that's only going to be good. I'm not afraid of losing a referendum.
Okay, so Drew, you and a UCP colleague, MLA Angela Pitt, have joined the End the Lockdowns National Caucus as part of your efforts to see more personal freedoms and also to enable small businesses to stay alive. So can you tell us a bit more about this caucus?
I sure can. Last count, it was about 45 MPs, former MPs, MLAs, and councilmen, and former politicians across Canada that believe the lockdowns have done as much mental health and economic damage as handling the COVID crisis. My goodness, southeastern Alberta, our mental health crisis is huge. It's at least as bad as the COVID crisis. I'm hearing the same from around Alberta. That's very, very sad. So this is a way to highlight, we've never been in a pandemic where we shut everything down before. So this is a way to highlight and review the government's responses to this COVID-19, to the pandemic. Are they going to lock us down every year? Is it time to open up? I mean, large parts of southern Alberta have 0 cases or very few. I've been arguing for regional cases. So, Jeanette, one of the main things we're trying to do is make all premiers and prime ministers and government officials, decision makers, aware that the lockdown is having dramatic effects, aware it's different in all parts of the province, and hopefully, like, shining light, some transparency on this will make it better for Albertans.
Now, the lockdown measures have, of course, caused all kinds of division. So, what's been the feedback that you've been hearing from your constituents? And has there been a difference between rural and urban citizens?
Oh, I absolutely believe there is a difference between rural and urban. Again, we for large parts of the 12 months that we've been under regulation and lockdown, our areas had zero cases or very, very small. People know that, you know, the first standard, like a lot of small businesses that were totally safe, that weren't allowed to open. Gyms are the best example. You know, we need that physical and mental health that goes with that, and they're still not fully open, where there could be long-term consequences of that. And Jeanette, the response from my constituents has been wonderful. I had about 40 of them come to my office last week, and not a protest, but they were in front of my office in support of me calling for more regional restrictions for COVID. And we definitely want to help each other, but we also know that you know, that there's mental health and there's economic effects as well.
So, sort of an anti-protest, if you will. Now, with Medicine Hat, particularly, I know has just had so much mental health issues there. Now, do you think that a year or two from now we may actually see all kinds of lawsuits against various levels of government because of deaths and medical distress inadvertently caused by lockdown measures?
I believe we will. I believe there's a reckoning coming for this. You know, it's so sad. We're, you know, community of 63,000, and we have to be over 20 suicides. Never mind the addictions and the overdoses and the strife that you just can't measure. And it's one of the reasons I joined the anti-lockdown caucus. Let's measure what the government's doing. Let's look at all the effects. Let's talk about it. If there's going to be a COVID-20, or if we're going to have to go into lockdown again, let's continually strive to do the best we can for all Albertans. And again, this is a brand new situation, so let's get it the best we can going forward.
Yeah, how wide would you like to see our province opened up? Like, what kinds of restrictions would you be okay with?
Well, I'd like to see our province open up more now. Gyms should be open. I think we can have a bigger floor square footage capacity for occupancy for churches and for small businesses. Um, I think that, and especially, I guess regional is the main thing. Large parts of rural Alberta have no cases or one small little cluster of cases. We're in our 12th month of COVID. There's a lot of fatigue out there, Jeanette, and I think if this is going to last longer, you know, and people also need some of the essentials. The chance to be spiritual, to go to church, that's essential. To go to a gym, physical and workout, that's essential. There's just so many things that we cannot overlook. Normal day-to-day human activity, physical and social and spiritual are three of them.
Yeah. Now, Drew, are you concerned at all about getting booted from the UCP caucus? Are you getting pressure from some fellow MLAs to stop speaking out about lockdowns?
No, I'm very grateful for Premier Kenny in that at this point. There's been very, very little pushback as to what I've been saying. Actually, I've been encouraged to speak out and try to work it as part of the team as well. I mean, the government from sometimes has messages that they want to take front and center. And, I think it's important for Albertans to realize I'm not in cabinet. I'm not a decision maker. So although I'm at caucus meetings and I can talk, I'm not part of those decisions. So at this point, I'm just going to continue to speak up, and I'm going to continue to relay what Albertans are telling me.
Now, the opposition has something else to say about that. You were mentioning before that it Rachel Notley had something to say
Rachel
about
Notley for 3 times has asked me to be kicked out of caucus by Premier Kenny because I've questioned and I've asked for more transparency on the COVID lockdowns. Funnily enough, she put it on her Facebook page 3 or 4 days ago, asking her people to ask Premier Kenny to kick me out. And as of this morning, I was leading that poll about 70 to 30, where 70% of the people were saying, no, you shouldn't kick him out. His voters put him there. He's speaking some things we want to talk about. He's presenting some different ideas and some truths. And that, Jeanette, that's one of the things we need in Alberta. We need some democratic reform where people like me, government backbenchers, have the opportunity to speak up consistently for the 50,000 people we represent, rather than just relay the government message. So I'm pleased to be able to do that.
Yeah. Now, before we let you go, Drew, any thoughts on the efforts we see to shut down free speech when it comes to dissenting opinions on how to deal with COVID? Where is this going to end up?
Well, thank you for that question. Isn't that incredibly, like so many people have tried to quiet, especially the conservative voices. We have forgotten that free speech, challenging each other, makes everything better. It allows us to exhaust our ideas and fully promote them. I always think of the Israeli army. I hear when they develop a plan, even if everybody in the room likes it, they appoint one or two people as the people to be the devil's advocate, to speak against the plan, to sharpen it up. Respectfully, we can do that. Respectfully, we should all speak up to make Alberta better and stronger for our communities, our families, and our kids. And I'm concerned about the culture now that armchair warriors that continually jump in and try to silence, especially people with conservative voices. But respectfully and loudly, let's all continue to speak up, and let's present the things that conservatives are trying to conserve: truth, beauty, the right to take risk and be self-reliant, and charity. And I'm a believer in respectfully, let's all speak up more than we have.
Yeah, absolutely. Drew, thank you so much for your time today. We really, really appreciate you coming on the show. Drew Barnes is the MLA for the Cypress Medicine Hat riding in Southeast Alberta.
Thank you very much, Jeanette.
We all want to get healthy, but it's tough to do in today's very busy fast food kind of world. Today's guest has some timely advice on the topic. Dr. Don Colbert. He's a board-certified family practice doctor for more than 25 years and a best-selling author as well. His latest book is Dr. Colbert's Healthy Gut Zone: Heal Your Digestive System to Restore Your Body and Renew Your Mind. Dr. Colbert, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you. It's great being here.
Now, judging by the title of your book, it sounds like gut health is vital to the rest of our overall health?
Absolutely right. In fact, Hippocrates back in 400 BC or around then said that all disease begins in your gut. And just now we're learning that he was absolutely right. But most of us just think of gut health as digestion, heartburn, clearing up constipation or diarrhea. But there's so much more. 2/3 of our immune system is located in our gut. To have good mental health, we need to have a healthy gut. We're finding now that if the gut is compromised, people are more prone to depression and anxiety, as well as even dementia is linked to the gut through the vagus nerve. It actually is a nerve that runs from the colon and the GI tract all the way up to the brain stem. And when there's a leaky gut or increased intestinal permeability in the gut, eventually there will become a leaky brain where you get more inflammation in the brain with memory loss, with dementia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's. And so again, I discuss all this. Even obesity is linked to the gut, especially your good bacteria. Certain good bacteria help prevent obesity by reducing our cravings for all the sweets and carbs and starches that cause obesity and all the fast foods that we crave.
Now, so you're saying whatever inflames our gut will eventually inflame our brain and the rest of our body at the same time, which, like you said, potentially leads to what, dementia and Alzheimer's?
Right, and even ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is many times related to the gut. And what is happening is so many doctors are prescribing meds like antibiotics that may help with strep throat and other problems, infectious disease, but they eventually harm the gut. They kill off the good bacteria. They cause bad bacteria to grow, as well as other meds like anti-inflammatories, acid-blocking meds. These are some of the most common causes of gut issues. that eventually will lead to other gut problems and eventually systemic problems such as autoimmune disease. So I discuss all this because it all started with me years ago. Back 30 years ago, I developed psoriasis. But I was a young doctor back then. I was treating patients day and night. I was on call every night. But then one morning, I woke up with psoriasis, and I went to my dermatologist buddy, and he gave me, these creams with coal tar that smelled horrible. With a long story, making it short, I got sick of this coal tar, and I said, that's it. I'm going to find the answer. I healed the gut, and within a few months, the psoriasis was gone. But I traced it back to I was using antibiotics, off and on for a few years, because when I would get sick, I didn't have time to stop working. So I'd take an antibiotic for a week or 10 days, clear the infection up, but I decimated my gut. When I healed my gut, the autoimmune disease went away, as well as my gut issues and the brain fog and all the other problems I was having, like fatigue. And so I've been doing this now for over 30 years, teaching people how to heal the gut, but we have so much more information now and so much about the gut and the microbiome, which is so exciting. And now we have the tools to heal the gut. And the main tool is our food.
So making the right food choices will have a major influence on our health. What kinds of food should we be putting on the never touch list?
Okay, well, this is what surprises so many people. In order to heal the gut, I list the 10 most common foods that really wreak havoc on the gut. And the most common I see that consistently wreaks havoc on the gut is gluten or wheat. And I tell patients with gut issues, stop eating the wheat or the gluten for a few months and let's let the gut heal. The other most common is foods that are high in lectins. Now, most people have never heard about lectins, but lectins are little proteins that are found in foods, especially grains and beans, legumes, peas and lentils and foods like that, that are little proteins that plants use to protect them from predators. But because we harvest our foods early, we harvest our foods when the lectin levels are at the highest peak. Now, lectins, when they're at the highest peak, what they do is they damage our gut lining. They cause a condition causing increased intestinal permeability that pulls the tight junctions of our gut apart and allows our gut to literally seep in undigested foods, bacteria, yeast, inflammatory products, and it creates a mess in our gut. So again, the foods that are most commonly associated with this are wheat, high sugar diet, high processed food diet, and lectins, especially our beans and tomatoes and nightshades, and again, the other grains like corn. So I teach people how to cut these foods out for a season, usually a couple of months, 2 or 3 months. Then we introduce them in and we literally allow the gut to heal.
But doctor, we're talking corn on the cob here. Come on. We got Tabor corn not far from here, southern Alberta. Peaches and cream, it's so good. You can't cut that out of your diet. Come on, man.
Well, I'm not saying forever. I'm saying for a short season, let's give the gut a rest so it can heal. Then you can introduce those back in. And some people have to rotate them every 3 or 4 days, but they can still generally eat them. But instead of genetically modified corn, use the organic corn, okay? And so I teach them what to do to heal the gut so we can keep the gut healed and experience good gut health as well as good mental health, as well as lose weight, which prevents most every disease.
So what kinds of vegetables specifically should we really be eating right now? Does it make any difference if they're raw or cooked?
Well, again, yes. And again, lots of veggies is important. And now raw vegetables, some people can't tolerate as much. They need to cook them. Some people have to limit their cruciferous veggies. The more veggies you can eat, the better. But a lot of people with gut issues have to limit those. So we put them on certain vegetables that are real gut friendly, like sweet potatoes and yams are very gut friendly. They literally start to heal the gut. High fiber foods. Now, again, the fiber is generally in the stems of the vegetables, the asparagus, the broccoli, not necessarily in the flowering portion, but in the stems. Also, certain foods like garlic and onions are full of these prebiotics that really help to feed our good bacteria. And then good bacteria foods such as goat milk yogurt or goat milk kefir, as well as sauerkraut and kimchi, or just taking probiotics is so important for restoring the gut. But one of the best foods for the gut are what we call resistant starches, such as green bananas. Now, don't overeat your green bananas, but start with, maybe 1/2 or 1 green banana, not necessarily dark green. Why green bananas? They're full of resistant starches that feed the good bacteria and heal the gut. And also green papayas, green mangoes to put in your salad, and then polyphenols, olive oil, dark chocolate, berries, tea. These are full of polyphenols that literally heal and soothe the gut, full of antioxidants and phytonutrients, especially high phenolic olive oil. And I go in detail about these powerful foods that we use to literally let food be our medicine that heals our gut, but also it helps to plant the good bacteria, which will actually protect our brains. When the gut is damaged, eventually it'll affect the brain and create brain fog, memory issues, and eventually maybe even dementia. So by restoring gut health, we're protecting our brains from degeneration in the future.
Now, we touched a little bit on protein earlier, and it's important to have protein in your diet, but how much protein, doctor, and what kind should we incorporate?
Well, good question. Again, most of us are eating way too much red meat, way too much pork. We find the healthiest types of protein are your chicken and your fish and your turkey and some pastured eggs. Those are the healthiest, and I say don't overconsume red meat, because red meat is generally high in saturated fat. And we found that a lot of saturated fat, like in red meat, like in butter and cheese and cream and coconut oil, will cause us to absorb a byproduct of gram-negative bacteria cell membrane called LPS, lipopolysaccharide. I know it's a mouthful, but these are highly inflammatory particles that literally go through our gut lining, and then they go through our brain, blood-brain barrier, and they inflame our brain, and they create inflammation throughout our gut and our brain. And an interesting statistic is people with Alzheimer's and dementia have 3 times more LPS in their brains than the average person. When you eat a lot of saturated fat like red meat, you're inviting dementia, LPS into your brain. So that's why you got to go easy on the red meat, not so much fatty meats. If you eat red meat, make sure it's the lean filet. We've had to change everything because of this new information on LPS and the brain, lipopolysaccharides. Because literally those saturated fats hit you right on that lipopolysaccharide, enter the brain and inflame the brain, but also inflame the gut and create mass inflammation throughout the body.
Now, what about fruits and nuts? How important are they to a healthy daily diet?
Very important. Again, the best fruits are the berries. The berries are full of these polyphenols, these phenolics. So I love blueberries. Every morning I start with either blueberries or strawberries, raspberries, blackberries, cranberries. Those berries are critical. But so again, the berries are critical. Nuts are critical too. Those are those good fats. That's why I tell people this is a gut-friendly Mediterranean diet without all the wheat. Okay, we're taking the wheat out, corn for just a season, and then we're putting back in organic corn and moderation in wheat. And some people have to avoid wheat because when people get off wheat, their gut heals and they feel so good. They say, that's it, I'm not eating wheat again. They're eating more rice, okay? And an interesting part is the brown rice is what inflames the gut when the gut has been damaged. So we take them off the brown rice and we can put them on the white basmati rice, and it doesn't generally inflame the gut near as much as the brown rice due to the lectins. I talk a lot about the lectins in the book to explain it because people are totally unaware. The doctor's unaware. But when you cut these lectins out of the diet for a season, like the brown rice, the wheat bread, the corn, the beans, the peas, the lentils, the nightshades, then the gut is able to heal. And then you can introduce them in moderation, and the gut does fine generally.
Now, we only have a couple of moments left here, doctor. What about dairy products, specifically cheese? Does that really help with our gut health?
Now, that's one of the enemies of the gut. The 10 enemies I talk about initially, that's altar food for about 4 to 8 weeks.
Come on, work with me on this here. Come on.
Well, you want your gut to heal, you give up the cheese. Now, let me explain something. There is a form of cheese that does not inflame the gut near as much, like feta cheese. Feta cheese is 70% sheep, 30% goat. It doesn't have the casein A1 in it that inflames the gut. and it has very little lactose that feeds the bad bacteria. So feta cheese is a much better choice, or casein A2 cheese that is much less inflammatory. But we cut out the dairy for, again, about 4 to 8 weeks so the gut can heal. Then we introduce it in. But the best cheese you can eat will be the feta or the sheep cheese or the goat cheese.
So if you recommend staying away from dairy, in other words, perhaps goat's milk, perhaps cow milk, what about alternatives, let's say, like coconut milk or almond milk?
Absolutely. Those are wonderful alternatives. And again, I tell people the lower fat coconut milk, the almond milk is low in sugar, so is the coconut milk. So those are wonderful alternatives. And so again, those are great for those people who have to give milk up for about 4 to 8 weeks. But then when they do, it's amazing what people tell me. Just like they say, oh, you know, the sinus problems I had are cleared up. The snoring I had is cleared up. All the mucus production I used to have, that little mucusy, raspy voice that so many people that eat a lot of cheese, a lot of milk have, clears up. But also the inflammation. It is so many people with joint problems that say when they give up the dairy, oh my goodness, the joint relief they get is amazing. So much to convince people to just either stay off of it or rotate it in their diet only maybe every 3 or 4 days. Or to use, just like I said, the feta, the goat, or the sheep cheese, okay?
Thanks so much for your expertise today, Doctor. Dr. Don Colbert is the author of Dr. Colbert's Healthy Gut Zone, available at drcolbertbooks.com. Thanks again for joining me from Dallas, Texas.
Thank you.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge C News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks for watching.